It was one of those cold, windy afternoons when life feels heavier than usual, when the weight of survival presses down harder than the chill in the air. The little roadside diner on Highway 42 was half empty, the smell of burnt coffee and frying bacon mixing with the faint scent of despair that lingered in its cracked vinyl booths. Behind the counter stood Evelyn Carter, a young woman in her late 20s whose tired eyes told stories she never spoke out loud. Her apron was faded, her hands were calloused from endless shifts, and the smile she wore was the kind that hurt to maintain. She worked double shifts just to afford her mother's medicine and keep the electricity running in their small trailer on the edge of town. Most days she had no time for herself. No dreams left to chase, only bills, exhaustion, and the constant fear of losing everything she cared about. But she carried on, because that's what strong people do. They keep going, even when the world seems determined to break them. That day, as she poured another pot of coffee, the diner door swung open and a wave of cold air blew in, along with a man whose confidence seemed to fill the entire room. He was dressed in a sharp designer suit, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. His expensive watch caught the light with every flick of his wrist. His name was Marcus Delaney, a wealthy businessman who had built a fortune buying and shutting down small, struggling businesses. The kind of businesses like this diner. The regulars went quiet when he walked in. He looked around the room with the detached amusement of someone who didn't belong there, like a man visiting a zoo to observe ordinary people. He took a seat at the counter directly in front of Evelyn, crossing his arms and smirking. "Coffee," he said flatly, "and make it quick." His tone wasn't rude in words, but in attitude it was a command. Evelyn nodded, pouring his coffee carefully. Her hands trembled slightly. She'd had a rough morning after, getting a call from the hospital about her mother's worsening condition. Marcus noticed the faint shake, and his smirk widened. "What's the matter?" he asked mockingly. "Never served someone like me before?" His voice was laced with arrogance, the kind that comes from years of never being told no. She didn't answer. She simply smiled politely, the way service workers learn to, a smile that hides pain. "Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of treating people with respect, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps spread more heart-touching stories like this one, and reminds the world that compassion still matters." Marcus continued to talk down to her as he waited for his meal. He made jokes about the Greasy Spoon Diner, about how people like her probably don't even dream anymore. Each comment was like a small knife, twisting deeper into Evelyn's already fragile heart. The other customers, truckers, bikers, old couples, exchanged uneasy glances but stayed silent. No one wanted to cause a scene. Then it happened. As Evelyn reached across the counter to refill his cup, her tired hand slipped, and hot coffee splashed onto Marcus's designer sleeve. He jumped back in outrage, his voice rising above the hum of the diner. "What's wrong with you?" he shouted. "Do you even know how much this costs?" His face turned red with anger, and for a moment the entire diner went silent. Evelyn's face turned pale. She apologized profusely, grabbing a napkin to help, but he pushed her hand away. "Don't touch me," he barked. "You're lucky I don't make you pay for this." His cruel laughter filled the diner. A few of his friends who had entered moments later joined in, mocking her appearance, her trembling hands, her cheap uniform. Evelyn stood frozen, tears forming in her eyes. It wasn't the coffee spill or the insults. It was the humiliation, the reminder that no matter how hard she worked, some people would always see her as less. She whispered an apology again, her voice barely audible, and turned away to hide her tears. Sitting quietly at the far end of the diner was an older man with a kind face and weathered hands. He had been watching the scene unfold. Dressed in a faded biker vest and jeans, he looked like just another traveler passing through. But there was something different about him. A quiet strength, a calm that carried authority. His name was Raymond Ray Lawson, though few recognized him. Once, he'd been a legend, a retired veteran, a former CEO of a trucking empire, and a man who believed in second chances. Ray watched Marcus's arrogance with growing anger. Finally, he stood up and walked slowly toward the counter. The room's attention shifted as the sound of his boots echoed across the tile floor. "That's enough," he said in a deep, steady voice. Marcus turned, surprised. "Excuse me?" Ray leaned on the counter beside Evelyn. "You heard me," he said, his tone calm but commanding. "She said she's sorry. You've made your point. Let it go," Marcus scoffed. "And who are you supposed to be? Her bodyguard?" He laughed again, motioning to his friends. "Look, the diner's full of heroes today." But Ray didn't flinch. "No," he said, his eyes locked on Marcus. "Just someone who doesn't like seeing people treated like dirt. Especially someone who's working hard for a living." The tension thickened. The regulars watched, holding their breath. Marcus muttered something under his breath and tossed a few bills on the counter. "This dump isn't worth my time anyway," he sneered. He grabbed his coat and walked out, his friends following behind. The bell over the door jingled as they left, the sound of their laughter fading into the cold air outside. Evelyn tried to thank Ray, but he simply smiled and said, "You don't owe me anything, miss. Just keep your head up. You're doing better than you. Think." Then he left a generous tip, a $100 bill, under his empty coffee cup, and walked out into the snow. That night, Evelyn cried quietly in the diner's kitchen after closing. She was tired, not just from work, but from life itself. She didn't know how much longer she could keep going. What she didn't know, however, was that her small act of kindness and her quiet strength had already touched someone's heart, someone who could change her life in ways she could never imagine. The next morning, as she was cleaning tables, a line of black motorcycles pulled up outside the diner. The rumble of engines filled the parking lot, and everyone inside turned to look. The bikers were all wearing the same leather vests, patches glinting under the winter sun, and in front of them was Ray, the man from yesterday. Evelyn froze, unsure what was happening. Ray stepped inside, smiling gently. "Morning, Miss Evelyn," he said warmly. "Hope you don't mind the company. The boys and I thought we'd come by for breakfast." Evelyn blinked in surprise. The bikers filled the diner, greeting her respectfully, ordering coffee and pancakes, leaving big tips in the jars. The once empty diner came alive with laughter and warmth. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn smiled, a real, genuine smile. As the morning went on, Ray asked to speak with her privately. He told her something that left her speechless. He explained that he wasn't just a biker passing through. He was also the founder of a chain of logistics companies across the state. He had started small, just like her, working in diners and garages before he made it big. "I saw something in you yesterday," he said. "Grace under fire. That's rare. I could use someone like you in my company." Evelyn's eyes widened. She didn't know what to say. He handed her a business card and smiled. "Think about it," he said softly. "Sometimes, the universe puts us in the right place at the right time for a reason." A few weeks later, Evelyn accepted the offer. She began working at Ray's company, first as an assistant, then as a manager. Her natural kindness and strong work ethic helped her rise quickly. Her mother got the medical care she needed, and for the first time in years, Evelyn had hope. Meanwhile, Marcus's story took a darker turn. A series of bad investments, lawsuits, and betrayals by his own partners left him bankrupt within a year. The man who once laughed at others now found himself alone and humbled, applying for any job he could find. One afternoon, he walked into a corporate building for an interview, and fate, as it often does, smiled in irony. Sitting across from him in the interview room was Evelyn Carter, now the human resources manager. She looked calm, confident, and radiant, nothing like the frightened waitress he had once mocked. Marcus froze, his face turning pale as he realized who she was. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, remembering every cruel word, every humiliation. Then she smiled softly and said, "It's good to see you again, Mr. Delaney. Let's begin." She treated him with kindness and professionalism, never once bringing up the past. She offered him water, asked about his skills, and even gave him a fair chance. By the end of the interview, Marcus's eyes were wet. "I don't deserve your kindness," he whispered. Evelyn simply replied, "Everyone deserves a second chance, even those who forget that once." Weeks later, Marcus began working under Evelyn's management. He worked hard, humbly, never forgetting the lesson life had taught him, that arrogance may build empires, but kindness builds people. And that day, he vowed never to laugh at another person's struggle again. Years passed, and the story of that diner became a quiet legend in their town, a story about how karma, compassion, and courage can change everything. Evelyn became a symbol of resilience, her life a living reminder that no pain is wasted when you face it with grace. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that what?